Okay, I've been given the nod by the boss at the back. My name is Rupert Younger, and I'm delighted to be chairing this Oxford Union-style debate here in Paris. Just a bit of background on the Oxford Union. It was founded in 1823 and is one of Britain's oldest university unions, as well as widely considered to be one of the world's most prestigious debating societies. The Oxford Union has a tradition of hosting some of the world's most prominent individuals from across politics, academia, and popular culture, ranging from Albert Einstein to Elton John. Many former presidents of the Union have gone on to hold high office in the UK and in the Commonwealth, including William Gladstone, Ted Heath, Boris Johnson in the UK, and Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan. Perhaps the most infamous and controversial debate held in the chamber was in 1933, and the motion was that this House would, under no circumstances, fight for its king and country. And that was passed by over 275 votes for the motion and 153 votes against the motion. The debate, as you might imagine, polarised opinion across the country, with the Daily Telegraph running an article headlined, "Disloyalty at Oxford, Gesture Towards the Reds." So the debate is known for its polemicism, and there have of course been many others in recent years, including inviting O.J. Simpson to give his first public address since his acquittal by a Los Angeles jury of murdering his ex-wife Nicole Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman, and also a controversial 2015 invitation to Marine Le Pen, leader of the Front National here in France, to address the union, prompting allegations that Le Pen was endorsing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Today, we hope for a more civilised, but no less engaged or polemic debate. Our motion today is: this conference believes that purpose commitments are a management distraction and destroy shareholder value. Arguing for the motion, the red-butted capitalists on my right, are first of all Hilary Hoyt, who's a postdoctoral research fellow at the Saïd Business School, University of Oxford. Hilary. The second arguer for the motion is George Wernicke, Associate Professor of Strategy and Business Policy here at HEC Paris. And wrapping them up at the end, tying it all beautifully together, is Oxford's own Professor, the Intesa San Paolo, Professor of Business, Ethics and Finance at the Business School, University of Oxford, Professor Alan Morrison. Now, the liberal-leaning left-wing hippies on my left are arguing against the motion. And in that corner we have, first of all, Josip Kotlar, who is a Professor of Management at the Politecnico di Milano. He is ably supported by the second speaker, Sunga Lee, who is an Assistant Professor of Management and Human Resources at HEC Paris. And wrapping them all into a nice, cosy, warm ball at the end is Tim Kukra, Managing Director of BCG Brighthouse, Europe. I will chair the debate, and this is how today will work. We will start with a pre-debate vote. Now, if you could put up the slide. You will see on the screen behind me a QR code. Please open the link, which will take you into a page where you will be asked to vote on the motion before you've heard any of the arguments. So I'm going to pause while you all do that, please. If it's hard to get on there, Iris and Pippa have got a sheet of paper which you can then take a picture on. Does it not work? Okay, so Iris and Pippa, do you want to then just whip up and down and just give one sheet per row or per two rows? and then they can just click on that one. Is it working now? Well, they have to vote. We're finished before we start. Does it work now? Okay, now apparently you can go in and vote, so please try again. Has everyone managed to get on to the QR code and get onto the voting page? If you haven't, please try again and register your vote. It's a very important part of the debate because the debate is going to be won or lost by how many of you change your mind. Okay? So we'll give you another minute just to complete that process. Okay, so I'll give you another 15 seconds. Anyone still struggling? Hands up if anyone's still struggling. No? Okay, all right. In that case, we can close the vote. Now, we'll now hear from the debaters, who each have 3 minutes to persuade you of the merit of their argument. You will then all have a chance to challenge, argue, and put points to any of the speakers. There are microphones in the room, so please wait for that to arrive before you speak. And please do engage, okay? We expect you, the audience, to throw the most unreasonable questions you can think of at the presenters. The fun of the evening is to put the speakers under pressure and get them to respond to the questions that you put. So have fun with it, and please be as noisy and intemperate as you wish to be. Certainly that's the case in the Oxford Union. So, with that done, I will now call on the first speaker for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and bonsoir. I'm Hilary Hoyt from Oxford, and I'm here with Professors George Wernicke from HEC Paris and Alan Morrison, also from Oxford. We will be persuading you tonight that purpose commitments distract managers and dilute shareholder wealth. Here's why. Purpose commitments come with risk. The risk is that some managers might take purpose seriously. So seriously that they pay more attention to the purpose than to the really serious business of making shareholders rich. Take manager Frances Haugen at Facebook. Her company's purpose was something about building community, connecting the world. Frances really bought into that purpose. Then she started losing sleep. Building community didn't square with some of the shareholder-centric things she saw going on. These were little externalities, if you will. You know, harming teens' mental health, spreading misinformation, swaying elections, little things. But they weren't little things to Frances. She became so distracted by the undelivered promise of building community that eventually she stopped managing and started talking to the press. Her testimony before the US Congress triggered a drop in share price that, depending on who you talked to, lasted more than a year and ended in restructuring. That was a managerial distraction. Here's another example. Tanuja Gupta and Meredith Whittaker at Google really believed their company's purpose, which at the time was, don't be evil. Sometimes these managers got in the way when Google tried to do really helpful things for shareholders, say, assisting the US government with drone surveillance. I mean, that pays a lot of money. Or suppressing information about human rights abuses in a country that Google wanted to enter. or sending away people who were accused of misconduct with some pretty nice severance deals. That's when Tanuja and Meredith shifted their managerial focus from leading projects to leading dissent. And they used the purpose commitment, "Don't be evil," as their rallying cry. Now, some might argue that purpose commitments aren't a managerial distraction, that they actually focus and motivate managers around a common cause.
30 seconds.
To this I say, you're right. Purpose does tend to motivate people. But the thing to understand is that for most industries and ecosystems, still, at least for now, focus in one area, like the purpose, often means distraction somewhere else, like value generation for shareholders. At the height of the Google troubles, 20,000 employees walked out on their job. That was a managerial distraction. So Google removed the distraction. They scrubbed the word "don't be evil" from the statement of purpose. Done.
Right, our first person against the motion.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I was preparing this intervention and this speech with my colleagues, we thought it would be ridiculously easy to demonstrate to a pool of people like you who are attending a purpose-centered conference that this statement is completely bullock. And yet, we knew that our opponents, our esteemed colleagues and opponents, they would bring up any kind of arguments to make it true. They will misconceive, redefine, change the very essence of what we are talking about. They will talk about purpose like the examples that our colleague just shared, which have nothing to do with purpose. So then don't be misguided. This is a great room, a room of elite. You are smart people, people who have power. I met some of you during the conference, and I'm sure that many of you can make changes happen outside here. So this is not about just an intellectual exercise, guys. This is a moral responsibility for us all to keep you, right, convinced that purpose is the thing, is a very important thing. And let me offer you two things, two reasons why all the arguments that our opponents will bring up to you will be completely fake. First, we talk about shareholder value. We talk about shareholder value without defining it, but what is shareholder value? And most importantly, who are shareholders? We must ask ourselves, we are not talking about the one-day trader, not even the one-year trader. We are talking here about 80% of corporates around the world being owned by entrepreneurs and business families who are not just interested about making the next quarter money. Okay? They are not interested just in making the short-term profit. They are interested in creating long-lasting wealth and positive legacies. Leave legacies for their children and for the people who will know and work and live with their children. So typically, this first argument is completely, weak because we must think about who are shareholders. And even if you think about smaller, shareholders like all of us who might buy some little shares, don't be fooled. We are not interested in the short-term gain. We are interested in the very long appreciation of value of the company, which ultimately rests on the ability to explore and fulfill a purpose. Second, when we talk about managers, what kind of managers are we talking about here? Let's not blame poor purposes. Let's blame poor management in understanding what their role is. Their role of managers today more than ever, with the advent of artificial intelligence, with all the technologies that we have, is certainly not that of maximizing a function. We don't need smart, clever, well-educated people. We don't need all the business schools around the world to train people who just maximize some machinery. We need instead people who can understand what is the ultimate contribution that the company wants to fulfill. Right? And is able to find ways, creative ways, to transform that vision into a profitable and good business opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dear members of this conference, cute arguments, cute arguments. I'm in favor of the motion that this conference believes purpose commitments are a management distraction and destroy shareholder value. Not because purpose is bad, absolutely not, but because it allows executives to enrich themselves while not delivering enough value to shareholders, to other stakeholders, but also to society at large. I'm going to make 2 points to support my argument. The first point is going to be that purpose targets are extremely easy to manipulate. In today's time, many executives have significant parts of their executive compensation tied to some purpose goals. These purpose goals are often vague, subjectively defined, and relatively easy to achieve. Indeed, a recent study among S&P 500 executives found that in 2002, 22% did not, I repeat, did not achieve their financial targets, while only 2% did not achieve their purpose-related targets. Think about that. Let me give you a specific example, right? In 2002, the board of Microsoft decided to give its CEO 165% of his purpose-based bonus for ensuring, I'm going to read this out loud, 165% of his purpose-based bonus for ensuring Microsoft's culture evolves. I'm not 100% sure I understand what it means that Microsoft's culture evolves. But for the board of Microsoft, it actually meant that the diversity of the workforce increases. Great, and the board thought that the executive actually over-delivered, while in fact, Microsoft's diversity of its workforce has increased by a mere 1 percentage point. Financial metrics are somewhat more objective, right? They're easy to measure. Profits are up or they're down. In contrast, purpose goals are flexible, and indeed, they're actually often defined by executives themselves. So what have we achieved by tying purpose to executive compensation? We have achieved, or we have created a safety net for executives that allows them to claim some success to some purpose goal and to enrich themselves without actually delivering to shareholders or society at large. The second point I'm going to make is that purpose ratings are inconsistent. So let's assume, okay, that purpose-driven goals are actually meaningful. Still, we don't really know how to measure them, or we don't have a good measure of them. And executives know this and exploit that. Purpose ratings from external data providers are often in contrast with one another, allowing executives to cherry-pick which measure to use to justify their bonuses. And since purpose-linked pay is based on firms' self-reported data and discretionary decisions, this is what these data providers collect and report upon, right? It basically leads to boards and investors not having any meaningful means to see if the bonuses paid to executives are justified, right? So Purpose Matrix created what? A black box that allows executives to game the system for higher pay. So let me close here and let me direct the word to our dear opponents. Purpose commitments should support a company's long-term strategy, right? And they should not be a tool for executives to enrich themselves or to the detriment of shareholders, other stakeholders, but also society at large. Purpose is great, don't get me wrong, right? But the problem is that it allows executives to enrich themselves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and our second respondent.
Okay, so, thank you. So our opponents who are for this motion say that purpose exists just to enrich the executives. But let's think about what purpose in itself, why companies exist, right? That's the fundamental question of why that purpose is there, why we believe in purpose-driven leadership, because it centers and gravitates not only just the executives, but a company and stakeholders and consumers, the people who work for different companies and firms, etc., to actually drive towards a particular goal and common goal. And we're presuming that in terms of human nature, that only executives are just all evil and are only out for their own goods. But that is not the case for the vast majority of businesses that exist. As my colleague pointed out, it's not just these large corporations, but there are many, many businesses, especially small family firms and other companies that are doing social responsible work and are working towards responsibility and actually doing something for society and benefiting them. So if there was no purpose and a call for greater purpose-driven and mission-driven goals, what is our alternative? Would it be the continuous push for one direction without checks and balances? Because studies, and we find that among younger generations who are our future workforce, more and more of them do care about authenticity, purpose, and values. And working for places, not only as consumers, but also as employees, working for places that are aligned with what they believe in. And so if we remove purpose from the conversation, if we remove the conversations of what is good purpose, what does it mean to have responsible purpose and responsible missions, what is the alternative world that we're creating? We actually do not allow, without purpose, we actually don't allow for checks and balances within this kind of corporate environment. It's not a management distraction. Rather, it's a way to pivot and tilt and push and move and nudge the managers towards a certain level of focus so they are not only responsible for themselves, but also, or just the shareholders who might constantly be asking for greater profits, but are responsible for greater consumer audience, non-shareholding stakeholders that have a stake in what these companies might be providing. After all, you talk about examples of where managerial malpractices have led to further destruction, but we also want to think about the Wells Fargo scandal, the Boeing scandals, and other numerous scandals that we've seen, not to mention more recent, lots of flight issues and things that have created lots of fear among people who fly a lot around planes, that when we're up for profit and not actually, and when we start ignoring these stakeholders, non-shareholding stakeholders, then we might end up with greater problems. So you say, forget purpose, we bring purpose back, and let's actually reframe what purpose is and help people imagine a world with more social responsible purpose. Thank you.
Well, you get the prize for being on time. That's certainly true. Okay, now is the chance for you to challenge, debate, throw polemic questions at any of the debaters you wish. So if I just point to people in order, so who'd like to ask a question? We have, so put your hands up and we'll get the microphones to you. So we have one there, we have one there. No, so the first one here, and the second one there. Do we only have one microphone? In the back. Oh, there we go, yeah, we could take, that's it. There's one there and one there, that's fine. So we have three microphones, so we have one there, one, the lady there and then there's a person at the back, yep, waving at the back. Thank you very much. And the fourth one? Fourth question? Okay, we'll come to a fourth question. Right, Rudy.
Yeah, my first question goes to the four, the motion. How can they compare the bonuses related to purpose to the ones related to financial performance when bonuses related to purpose counts less than 20% of the total bonuses and variable compensation, and the financial compensation are gigantic proportion bigger?
So we'll have the question, I will put the question to each side for fairness. George first.
Yeah, it's easy to answer, right? I mean, just that purpose-related bonuses are smaller in absolute size doesn't contradict my argument, right? I mean, even the 20% of executive compensation, executive uses to basically enrich themselves with very little accountability here. So if these things are poorly defined and cannot be really measured, why are we paying somebody for something that we don't really know what it is and that we can't really measure? And even if it's just 20% of, at least in the US, a very big salary, I think that is a bit of an issue. So again, purpose is not a problem, as long as we can define it well and boil it down to some measures so that we have some accountability with managers, so to hold them accountable for their actions. And this is my argument.
Quick riposte. So I think first of all I want to congratulate you on directly contradicting each other. So one side of the argument is beware, purpose, high risk, super dangerous for managers. The other side is great way to make a ton of extra money. Congratulations on that one. And I think you really need to get out of the classroom more if you think as a manager in a large company exposing yourself to purpose and the scrutiny it comes with is the best way to make more money. I really don't think that makes sense in any way.
That's fine. Okay, second question over here. Thank you.
Hello. I have a question to the left wing. I think that 80% of the companies, even more, they declare that they have purpose. But how to understand if they're just greenwashing or they're really following the purpose?
Good question. Right. Right, who's going to pick this up from this side? And I'll come to you. So, do you want to just quickly repeat the essence of the question, because they didn't get it?
Got it. So, if I understood correctly, it was about how a lot of companies' purposes are ill-defined, and how do you make sure that's not just purpose washing, greenwashing. Okay, I live in a context in a country where there's lots of greenwashing and purpose washing going on and brand washing going on, but so it's an interesting question. That's a fair question, right? And if you think about purpose, and some companies might, in the ill-defined sense, just have a vision, mission somewhere and say, we have a purpose, we're going to go for it, we're purpose-driven, mission-driven. And some people might say that that's great, that's greenwashing, that's purpose washing, but I would actually challenge you that just because those things are still there, even if the company might be using it for alternative purposes, and there might be, it might not be the best intention as we had intended, it still shifts the needle. Because it still moves the conversation. It shapes the social discourse, so that even if a company is trying to purpose wash to an extent, there might be consumers and others, non-shareholding stakeholders, who might be putting a particular bird's eye view on it, and it might actually set boundaries than if there was no purpose and they just kind of went off and did whatever they want. Right? So imagine these already purpose washing companies, if they had no purpose, what would they really be engaging in?
Yeah, I mean, you're really preaching to the choir here, right? I mean, just confirming what I basically said. And here, Tim, it really helps to go into the classroom and go into an office and think about how we define these things very carefully and not just throw out some buzzwords like many companies do, that they engage in some CSR, ESG purpose or whatever is the fashion that is currently going on here. So unfortunately, I believe in the concept and I've studied it deeply. I just think we currently cannot really implement it. And so what we see here is a lot of exactly this, purpose washing. So as soon as we look behind the curtain, there's not much left. And it is a tool of executives to enrich themselves.
So because you've gone ad hominem, I'm going to allow Tim the chance to respond.
Again, I would say, however many times you repeat that purpose is the best tool for executives to enrich itself will not make it any more true. I just don't believe this argument at all.
Okay.
It's not about belief, it's about facts.
Okay, third question down the back.
Thank you so much, Rupert, for mentioning 1933, and I'm really curious about the research and managerial implications of this debate. If we were to go back and say, once we make this decision, what would maximize our likelihood of working with Nazis, or maximize our likelihood of working with fascists, or even now, maximize our likelihood of making sure our companies never hire black people, or women, or people in the LGBTQ community? For the red-blooded capitalists, what do you think is going to happen if we were to take your position?
Okay, so the question basically is, if you're right, what's the future for business? That's fair? Is that a fair summary? Why don't we have it as that, rather than going back into... Yep, Hilary.
If we are right, then the call for business is to fix how purpose is working. We would never make a call that purpose is useless, because purpose actually, this gap between the values and the implementation will always exist in companies. And that gap is problematic, but it also allows for aspiration. Without that gap, we've arrived and we have nowhere to go. So purpose is integral in the way that a company operates, but we need to fix that thing. And until we can make sure that purpose is not just distracting managers and is not just enriching shareholders, then let's keep on working on purpose.
Okay.
Well, me just reiterate that our esteemed colleagues are trying to fool you guys. They are misconceiving what the concept of purpose is. Purpose is the reason why a company exists. It is the ultimate ambition the company has beyond profit maximization. This is the definition. Keep it with you, because our colleagues are keep changing this definition and try to confuse you. At the end, values, mission, vision are a very different thing from purpose, but I don't have time for a lecture.
Thank you very much. Okay. Right, the next set of questions. Hands up who'd like to ask another question. So we have one here on the my right. Second one. Yep, there, on just down a bit further. And the third, that gentleman there. There we go. And then the fourth one, there's a gentleman right behind who put his hand up. Behind the third one there. Oh, that's okay, great. Thank you very much. I've got 3 questions, starting here.
Thank you very much. Very interesting debate. I have a question for the against team. So as an individual shareholder of several publicly listed companies, I feel a little bit offended by your normative approach to what shareholders should look like in terms of value. I think shareholder value is a objective, and whether we like it or not, financial measurable performance. And when you discuss that long-term shareholding value should be about looking for other things, I'm not sure that this is really part of the debate, right? We're not redefining here what shareholder value is. So just like if you could expand a bit on this point.
Okay, who's going to respond first to that?
I will go, given that you touch upon my point before. Well, we are not talking about shareholder value per se. We are talking about shareholders and one important stakeholder of any firm. We are talking about what the purpose of the business is and not the purpose of the shareholder. And I would rebate to that, counter-argue that today, nowadays, thankfully, there is a market for corporate control. There is a best shareholder for every company. And every company, with its management, will be looking for the best shareholder. So if you are a shareholder who doesn't understand the purpose, cannot express a long-term view, cannot support the company in accomplishing its mission and its purpose, ultimately you are not a good shareholder for that company and will be a better shareholder coming after you to buy your shares.
I don't know what to add. I mean, your criticism was right to the point, and you've seen from their answer that they don't really have a good argument, right? So I believe it was that.
Okay. Thank you for that vapid response. Let's move to a second question, which was there. Thank you. Yep.
Good evening. This is a question for the 4 camp. I understand that subjective goals might be manipulated, but you can also count things like well-being, even if it's a subjective answer. You ask me if I'm good, how good I am, I will give an answer. So the question is not, we need KPI as business operators or whatever. The question might be not to simplify the goals to what can be measured at a point where we are not human anymore. Don't you think?
Okay, who'd like to respond to that?
So yes, there are things one can measure and one can objectively pursue them, and that's a good... Is that audible? There are things one can measure, one can objectively pursue them, and those things are good. I would just remark that quite often shareholders in large companies make money precisely because organizations like, say, Meta, trample all over the well-being of workers. So if we couch our metrics in terms of worker well-being and we try to improve it, it's quite possible that we'll improve worker well-being and we'll redistribute wealth from shareholders to workers, which is great, but it's exactly what we say will happen.
Okay, and the response?
I just want to reply that all the arguments you've brought so far collectively rely on misuse and mismanagement. I mean, that's the substance of your argument. Purpose is no good because it might be abused to make money, or it might be mismanaged in some other way in reporting or tweaking KPIs or so. So I find the substance of that relatively thin if you can only argue in a worst case scenario, and that's what we're talking about.
Yep, please.
Okay. I've just made a remark in favour of purpose, and I pointed out that sometimes purpose will result in a redistribution of wealth away from shareholders, and that is a mark of good management. It's complicated, I'll explain it in the classroom.
Okay, right. The next question, there was a third microphone given, is that right? So there's a question there. you very much.
Good evening. My question is addressed to the four team, and that is you poo-poo in a very flippant way the idea of purpose commitments without making any suggestions on how to improve it. And perhaps destroy is a strong word, but mitigate or slow it down for more long-term purposes could be quite useful. So how do you address it, given the urgency of the world crisis that we know in several financial circles and the enrichment of the top 1%? Thank you.
Okay, it's worth pointing out that we are required only to support this motion. We are not required to resolve all of the world's social problems, which I agree are manifest and significant. And if we point out that a preferred tool is not working, that's a good sign that we need to find a different tool. Unfortunately, I don't know what the different tool is.
And a reply?
A very quick one, because the other solution has been invented 50, 60 years ago, and here it looks like we want to go back to that time in a way to see the world as a mechanicistic world where, you know, everyone has its own function and everything can be modeled like a machine. Well, 50 years ago things maybe work differently, I don't think so, but today these mechanisms certainly don't stand the test of reality.
Okay. Right, next set of questions. We've got room for one more round of questions, so if you've got questions, put your hand up. And Iris will come and give you the microphone. So one at the back there. And who else would like to raise their hand for a question? Okay, Kevin?
My question is for the foresight. So to what extent is purpose and shareholder value comparable on the fact that shareholder value has been around for 200 years, has developed a legal, economic, accounting system all to underpin it, while purpose seems kind of new, maybe slightly immature, but growing on the margins. So how can you compare them if one is baked into the entire power structure of the world and the other is kind of trying to rise against it?
Thanks for the question. We are actually saying that purpose is now baked in to the power structure of the world. Can you tell me a company that doesn't have a purpose?
Many.
Okay, so you have a run.
And do they operate any differently?
I would assume so, yes.
Sorry. Okay, so please take that microphone.
I think we've reached a point in the discussion where you have to realize that having a generic discussion about purpose is very similar to having a generic discussion about strategy. You're saying purpose per se is a problem. That's like saying strategy per se is a problem. I would also agree every company in the world has some sort of strategy. Would we blanket say that strategy doesn't make sense because some don't work? It's the same thing you're saying about purpose. Many put it on a website and claim they have a purpose. I would argue 70% of them are actually not fit to be a purpose and are not worth being implemented, and so that's what we're fixing. However, we don't want to do away with the concept of purpose as much as we want to do away with the concept of strategy, per se.
Agreed, we do not want to do away with the concept of purpose.
Okay. Okay, are there any more questions from the floor before we then move to closing arguments? Any final questions from the floor? Okay, I have one question then, if I might put to both sides, which is, would both of you like to respond to the question, is there a difference between purpose and social purpose? Is there a difference between purpose and social purpose? And if so, what is it? So, I'll start with this side.
Yes, obviously. Purpose is a superset of social purpose. I got up this morning and my purpose was to brush my teeth. People who breathe in my breath probably regard that as slightly pro-social, but it's not really a social purpose. When I run a business, my purpose is social. These are clearly not identical concepts. Social qualifies purpose. It's semantic.
Do you think it's possible for a business to have no social purpose?
No.
Okay, very clear.
It's about judgment. right? It's about purpose. It's a public commitment. It's a statement. So it attracts judgment. It attracts positive judgment. It attracts negative judgment. If you have a purpose that other people disagree with or find actually not acceptable, they will, in a way, avoid your company, they will not buy your product, they will not want to work for you. Whereas if you have a social purpose in the sense that it tries to create value for someone who, beyond the company itself, then people will like the company, will find some positives there, will be more leaning to being clients, to investing in that company, to actually support the company how they have. So yes, there is a difference between a bad purpose and a good purpose, if that's what you meant.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So with that, the Q&A comes to a close. You now have closing arguments from the final two speakers, following which we're going to ask you to vote again. So, I'd like to start with the 4 team.
Mr. Chairman, Benjamin Franklin once said of money that the more a man has, the more he wants. Instead of filling a vacuum, it makes one. And he clearly had a point. If we devoted our collective endeavours to the pursuit of money, then we would live hollowed out and incomplete lives. But those are the lives that the other side is compelled to defend. Because in defending corporate purpose statements by pointing to their supposed capacity to increase shareholder value, they're really saying that the actual purpose of a corporation is to make money. That argument vanishes in a puff of self-contradiction, and moreover, they'll never get a dinner invitation out of Benjamin Franklin. And that's probably why neither of those speakers actually mentioned the shareholder value question once. 40% of the stock market's appreciation between 1989 and 2017 was attributable to wealth redistribution from workers to shareholders. That figure comes from an article that's going to appear in the April issue of the highly prestigious and fantastically pro-market Journal of Political Economy. You've probably heard of it. It published all of Milton Friedman's best work. That wealth redistribution from workers to shareholders, enriching shareholders at the expense of workers, did not happen by chance. It required the concentrated effort of a cadre of managers who learned about corporate purpose mostly from English-speaking business school professors who were either ignorant of or unconcerned by history and philosophy. Our ever-widening wealth inequality, our social polarization, and the coarsening and stupidification of our political discourse are therefore not random social artifacts. They're the consequence of intellectually and morally bankrupt ideas that spread like putrefaction from the Anglophonic Academy into the world and led many people to think that purpose commitments succeed only when they raise the share price, and that is nonsense. If the managers of corporations were to drop their single-minded focus on the share price and instead think more holistically about the impact of corporate activity on the common weal, then they would indeed be distracted. They would be distracted from economically unproductive rent-seeking with unjust and destabilizing long-term consequences. They would deprive shareholders of the wealth they have extracted from the labour force, and both of those effects would be good. The moment you attempt to defend purpose statements from a shareholder-centric perspective, you've made a moral misstep. Purpose statements are intended to focus attention on what really matters, and what really matters is not wealth redistribution from workers to shareholders, but the pursuit of our collective well-being. By definition, genuine purpose statements are a form of managerial distraction that lowers shareholder wealth in a good way, and that's at least been true for 35 years. So this motion asks you to endorse a humane capitalism, and it's also a tautology that logically you cannot deny. You owe it to the Enlightenment values honoured for so long in this building to vote in favour of the motion.
Okay, always hard to follow an ethics professor, so my only reply to this is we'll take it out of the classroom again. But before we do that, I want to say it's remarkable that a group of tenured and aspiring academics from what must be some of the world's most purpose-driven organization argues so passionately for short-term market orientation and also monetary gains. So I can really see you walking the talk there. Well done on that one. I think all the arguments I heard from you are relatively easily summarized. Bad purpose is bad. I think it'll be hard to disagree with it. Bad strategy is bad, bad wine is bad. It's entirely besides the point. And so taking it out of the classroom really means looking at what's happening in practice. And that means let's look at the largest organizations, the most successful organizations in the world, the most successful leaders in the world. And I got to say, George, you really messed it up on the Microsoft example, unfortunately. Satya Nadella, I sat in a room with him when he stood in front of leaders and says in his 10-year tenure, the most important thing he's done is to refocus this organization on purpose and a new sense of identity. And watch out, changing its culture, right? To a learning culture, to an innovation culture, to a partnering culture. And just translating this into a language that you will understand, the outcome of that is 15x increase of share price. So that's significantly above peers and above the tech industry. And so this is number 3 of the largest market cap companies in the world. Then let's look at the other ones. We can look at number 1, which is Apple, right? Poster child for being purpose-driven. Not just the old guy, also the new guy, Tim Cook, in much the same way. Okay, now we've looked at number 3 and number 1. We can look at number 2, which is now NVIDIA, right? And so, quote from Jensen Huang, the CEO, "My goal is to create the conditions where amazing people come to do their life's work." Now, I would say, who wouldn't dream of coming to do their life's work at a company that, wait for it, maximizes its shareholder value? Does that sound realistic to you? It certainly doesn't to me. So I think while you sit here and argue slightly from the ivory tower with a lot of thoroughness, but not really any practicality behind it, we have these 3 leaders of some of the most successful companies in the world singing an entirely different tune. And so in the end, I think for me, this is much less of an empirical question as it is a question about the future that you want to shape. I mean, who wants to live in a world without purpose? Do you want to go to a job in the morning where the question what it means, why you go to this job, is labeled as a distraction and put to the side? I certainly don't want to. Do you want to live in a world where there are no teachers, no firemen, no artists, watch out, no academics? No, we all don't want to live in this world. And so as you vote again, make it that. It's not the question of who's got the better data. It is essentially a question of what kind of corporations we want and what kind of standards we're looking for. Okay.
Okay, now for the denouement, the moment. We've now finished with the most important part of the evening, the final vote. So you'll see on the screen again the renewed. Is it working? It's working. Okay, so the QR code refreshed. Please open the link, take you to the voting again, and we'll pause while you vote. Okay, are you still voting? People still on their phones? How are we doing? Are we getting to where we... Okay, good, so everyone has voted pretty much. Okay, so we'll give you another 15 seconds, 15 more seconds, and if you haven't voted, please do so, finish it off. Okay, thank you very much. The voting will close. Thank you. The winning team will be the team that managed to change the most minds. So we'll be evaluating that change in the voting. The winning team will be announced when we return to the final session in 30 minutes, which will be the start of the fireside chat with Florent Ménégo. So we'll see you in 30 minutes and we'll announce the winning team at that point. Thank you to our presenters. See you in 30 minutes. Should we have a team photo? Have a team photo. Team photo. Team photo here. Sure. Group photo maybe here in front. Everyone comes to the front.
I'm sure I can get more requests from someone.